this is JT. Welcome to Bodyweight Strength. In this video, what I'm going to be doing is going through and demonstrating a lower body training session that's going to be one half of an upper-lower split. Now, in the video notes, what you're going to find is links to each of the movements I perform to help you navigate to those detailed instructional videos. And what I'm going to start doing with training splits is I'm going to demonstrate each movement in the beginning of the video. So what you're going to see, I'm doing 6 movements in this training session. I'm going to show you a quick few second demonstration of each movement, and then after that I'm going to go through the full workout myself and take you through that full workout with a voiceover. And so the reason I'm doing this is so that if you see one of these videos come up with a new training split and you just want to see the movements and you don't want to hear my color commentary or you don't want to hear my guidance, you can just basically go right to the first portion of the movements and it'll just be boom, 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 and you can watch each movement and you can go do the workout. If you want to see me go through the training session, that's going to come right after that. So what I'm trying to do is make all of my content as navigable and functional as it can be, and I figure this way for the people who either are coming back around a second time and just want to see the movements, or people who don't want to hear, all of my talking, this will cater to you guys. So that's what's going to happen here. And this training session is going to be continuing with our one set to failure training methodology. And this is really ideal for newer to intermediate trainees. If you've got a year of serious training or less under your belt, this really is ideal for you because there are studies that show additional volume past single set to failure in a training session provided no additional strength gains. For advanced trainees, this may not be the case. So if you've got years under your belt, additional volume might do you some good. But we'll dig into all that later. I just want you to know that if you're new or newer or just getting back at it after a while, if you've not been training hard consistently for a long time, single set to failure is a really efficient way to make progress. Now in this video, what you're going to notice is I did single set to failure, and then I used an intensity technique to extend the sets. So what I did is I went 1 set to failure, rested 15 seconds, and then I basically added a little mini set to failure, which really works as a continuation of the first set. So if you've been doing single set to failure, for example on push-ups or squats, whatever the case is, and you feel like you were making progress, and now the progress is stalled, you're not adding additional reps to your sets, this is a way that I've found to help you do that by taking that mini rest period after the set and then getting right back under a continuation of the set. Oftentimes what you'll find is week after week, you'll either be adding reps to the mini set or now you'll be adding reps to your first set. So this is going to be a way to help you get past plateaus if you've hit some plateaus. So in this training session, I'm doing 6 movements, all lower body. I rest 60 seconds between sets and I edit the rest out to try to make this as efficient as possible. So it's going to be boom, 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 one exercise right to the next with the rest periods edited out. It's actually pretty taxing, especially if you're going to be doing that intensity technique that I add. So if you need to go longer than 60 seconds of rest and you need to go 1.5 minutes between sets, by all means go ahead and do that. But the way that I perform this training session, the entire thing should take you just under 20 minutes. But again, if your conditioning's not there, if your conditioning level's not there, you can extend the rest periods. As we go through the training session, I'll be explaining little tips, little things about each of the movements I'm performing and walking you through the training session. So thanks for bearing with me, and thank you for supporting Bodyweight Strength. Now let's get to it. So the first exercise will be your squat variation. If you cannot do pistol squats, then I'm showing you 2 options here utilizing a chair so that you have some clearance for your leg either to the front, or if your balance isn't the best, you can go to the rear and spot yourself with the non-pressing leg like I just did. And if you're going to pistol squat, because we're going to failure, you can utilize the hands walking down a side of your rack or a pole or even in the doorway, a frame of a doorway. And in this way you can spot yourself and do your pistol squat safely, even to the point of failure, and not worry about your knee not tracking straight. And then next I'm doing single leg hip thrusts or glute bridges. And you can certainly do these with 2 legs if that's where you are in your current skill strength level. But going to single leg definitely increases the difficulty And a tip for these is work on contracting the glutes, flexing the glutes at the bottom of the movement, and trying to keep those glutes contracted and flexed throughout the movement itself. And that'll help you fail more quickly. And then the next glute exercise, which is more glute medius, this is going to be the clamshells. And so the glute medius is undertrained in most lifters. And so this is definitely something that I think everybody needs to focus on. It improves your running and walking gait. It's great for injury prevention, and it'll help your squat and deadlift if you're a standard lifter. And then this is a quad extension, essentially just like you would do on a quad extension machine, or very similar. But obviously, you know, we're just using body weight here. The thing to remember with these is pressing down on the instep, or, you know, the top of the foot, pressing down through the ground. And then here we're doing basically calf raises, single leg calf raises, and I'm stepping on my rack to allow some elevation of the foot so that at the bottom of the movement, as I go through flexion, I'm stretching out the calf and getting a better range of motion. And then the 90-degree calf raise, which really targets the soleus, where earlier we targeted the gastroc. Okay, so now I'm starting the actual training session, and I'm starting it out with pistol squats or single leg squats and assisting myself on the rack. And the reason for that is when you start with pistol squats and you self-assist, you can get nice and deep into the squat at the bottom of your range of motion. And what happens is at the bottom of that deep squat like that, there's a lot of glute and hamstring required to get you out of the hole in that squat. And so by starting the training session with these single leg squats, or whatever variation of the most advanced variation of squats that you can do, what's going to happen is you're going to need less repetitions of the accompanying exercises to get to failure. So I find that by doing single leg squats first, then when I get into my glute bridges and when I get into my clamshells, they're all more difficult and I fail more quickly because these squats are already pre-fatiguing those muscles. So that's generally why I will start with pistol squats. And I'm just about to failure. And so now it's a 15-second pause. And this is this technique that I was talking about to go past failure and extend your set. So we've got 15 seconds of rest. And then from there, we're going to go right into a second mini set. Again, that's just an extension of the first set. And after one set to failure of pistol squats, you're already going to feel it. You're going to feel that pump in the lower body musculature, but especially after the 15 seconds of rest, and then you do the second, the extension of the first set, you're going to feel it quite a bit more. And this makes it where that 60 seconds of rest that I'm taking right after it feels woefully inadequate, to be honest with you. But you want to build that, or at least I want to build that cardiometabolic conditioning. And so the 60 seconds rest are something that I'm going to program in. And then week after week, your cardiometabolic conditioning gets better. And then those 60-second rests are more adequate. And if you just take sets to failure, the 60 seconds of rest might be more than enough. But when you do the 15-second pause and you extend your sets, then that rest that comes after the set extension, it's going to feel like a lot less rest, because that second mini set that you put in, or that extension of the first set, it's pretty taxing. And that's probably something important to hit on. What we want to maximize is peripheral fatigue, or fatigue of the local musculature by going to failure. So for example, in these squats, I want to fatigue my lower body muscles. I want to fatigue my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes. And what I don't want to fatigue is my central nervous system, right? As you get further into a training session, the longer the training session goes, especially at a high intensity, the more central fatigue, not just peripheral fatigue, so not muscular fatigue of the muscles being trained, but fatigue of the central nervous system starts to accumulate. And so that's why really long high intensity training sessions are very taxing. And so And at the same time, high volume training sessions, period, the longer a session goes, the higher the central fatigue. And that's why when you train with volume, you need a lot of rest, and why volume can be a double-edged sword. So the whole point of my programming is going to be high intensity, efficiency, and not long training sessions. Okay, so after those pistol squats, we're going to go into the quad extension. And when you do these quad extensions, you're just going to, if you've never done them before, you're going to lean back and not very far, okay? This is safe for the knees. It's not something that's going to damage your knees, provided that you do them properly. And what I mean by that is when you first start to do these, you may only be coming back 6 inches, you may only be coming back 12 inches. You want to increase the range of motion in these slowly over time as you build the quadricep strength and as you perform them. So like with anything, when it's a new movement, don't look at how deep I go or somebody else goes and then think, okay, I'm going to do that. Assess yourself, put in a good set, and go back a specific amount. And if that feels pretty easy, then the next training session, go back a little bit farther. And then over time, as your musculature is adjusting to the movement, increase your range of motion over time. So I just failed at that set, and now the 15 seconds of rest, and then getting back under the small extension. And what you'll notice if you employ this technique of the small set after failing is that it's super taxing, and most likely you're only going to get, on not so much central fatigue because we're not doing long duration again, but peripheral fatigue or local muscular fatigue. It's really taxing. So you may have gotten 12 reps of something the first time, and you may fail at 3 on the mini set. As far as order of exercise, so I did the single leg squats first, obviously, and then I went into the quad extensions because coming out of those deep pistols, my glutes and my hams were pretty fired up, and so I wanted to do the quads to give those muscles a little bit of a longer rest. I mean, even though they're still being used, not quite as much. Obviously, the quads were targeted in that quad extension. So now with the clamshells, this is really the best way I found to target glute medius, which is a muscle that's not targeted well by squats or by deadlifts, even straight-legged deadlifts or whatever else. You really got to do work that brings the legs out laterally away from the body to target the glute medius. And the glute medius plays a huge role in injury prevention, athletic performance, and so it really is important, I think, to get these in. And one of the movements that I can do a ton of reps on is going to be the glute bridge or glute thrust. And so I program it in personally after these clamshell, abduction, glute medius, after this work and after the squats, because then I'm failing in a reasonable amount of time. If I do them early in the lower body session, I'm doing 30 something reps. And so if you're in a situation like that, you can rearrange the order of these movements. If you are not good, if you have a weak glutes and you're not, and you don't have to do a lot of reps of that to fail, you can put it earlier in the movement. Maybe you do maybe you can't pistol or even assisted pistol, but you do lots of body weight squats before you fail, 50 reps, 60 reps, and it's super boring for you, but you're not ready for scaling to a harder movement because of lack of mobility. Then what you can do is you can basically just throw your squats at the end right before calves. So you can do this other stuff first. You could do your clamshells, you can do your glute medius abduction, and then you can do your glute bridge, and you can do your quad extensions. So you can do all that stuff first, and then you can hit your body weight squats last, which if you're not ready to scale to something that will help you fail much sooner, and you're already high repping body weight squats, that's exactly how I would program it. I would just throw my squats at the end. So I pre-fatigue all the leg musculature first with all this other stuff. And so that way when I get to my body weight squats, I don't have to do 6 minutes of body weight squats to failure, because I had to do that in the full body 20-minute training session, and it was brutally boring. So that's my recommendation. If you are a guy or girl who's already high rep squatting and it's taking too long to fail, just move them to the end. Now it's on to the single leg hip thrust or glute bridge. And something that happened in this set that I didn't edit out, I just rolled with it, and that way you could kind of see if this happens to you. I'm pushing one set to failure, and then I'm supposed to rest 15 seconds and then do a mini set to failure. And so my mind wasn't in the right place, and I forgot. And so what I did is I just did one set to failure, right leg, then switched and immediately went one set to failure, left leg. And I realized what I was doing as I was already into the left leg set. So I just went ahead and finished it out and then switched right back over to the right leg. So obviously it was longer than a 15-second rest period between each leg. That wasn't really planned that way. I just kind of salvaged it. So one thing with these, and you can see me with my hand feeling back there, my glutes, and that's something that these are effective, but a lot of people feel like, hey, I'm not getting good engagement with my glutes, right? I don't really feel like I'm wearing my glutes out. And sometimes it feels like your hamstrings are failing first, and that's actually okay. We're not doing isolation work. Your hamstrings have to do work in this movement along with the glutes. And so if your hamstrings happen to fail first, that's perfectly fine. Over time they become stronger, and your glutes are gonna still have to do work. But the thing that you wanna focus on is when you're at the bottom of this movement and your glutes are just, an inch or two or whatever above the ground, flex that glute. So work on contracting, like squeezing your glutes at the bottom, contracting, flexing that glute, and then driving down with the heels, pushing the hips up. If you have a hard time flexing your glutes, that's actually normal. When you don't practice flexing, I know when you see people and they're like flexing in the mirror and everything, it seems super, super cheesy. But there's actually studies that show that just maximally contracting a muscle in a flex, so not a dynamic movement, but just flexing the muscle over time results in real increases in hypertrophy and strength. So you could flex your way jacked, I guess. But the lesson there is that engaging the muscle, maximum contraction, is important. So when you are doing a movement like this, if you're not feeling it in your glutes and you think, man, I'm moving my hips up and down, I'm dynamically doing the movement, but I'm not really feeling it, then that means you're not getting that muscular engagement the way that you should be. And so it means that you need to practice on flexing and squeezing that muscle and getting it engaged. There's nothing wrong with a movement. Rather, you need practice in engaging the musculature and doing the movement well. And so after that, we're going to standing calf raises. And I'm doing these on the rack to give me like 2 inches of elevation, so that as I come down to the bottom, I'm stretching the calf muscles and getting basically just a higher dynamic movement here. And these, when you do your standing calf raises, what you're doing is you're primarily targeting the gastroc muscles around the calves. And then you're going to do the 90-degree calf raises to get the soleus muscle. And so if you are going to a regular gym and you're going to work calves, what you'd want to make sure that you do is the seated calf raise or donkey calf raise, as well as standing calf work. You want to do them both so that you get the soleus and gastroc. And since we're not using weights, we are basically doing body weight, so they're going to be higher rep, obviously. But what's really important when you're training calves with body weight especially, and it's important with weights as well, but you want to extend and you want to press down into that flexion with your foot as far as you can and get the tightest contraction, maximal contraction in those calves, kind of like I just talked about in the glutes. Getting that squeeze at the top and getting that maximal contraction, that matters in terms of stimulating muscle fibers and getting hypertrophy and strength and all that other stuff. So that's one of the things that you often see is people adding more weight to movements and then training through a limited range of motion. And so the argument that sometimes you hear is, well, muscles contract when they contract. So like even if you don't train through the full range of motion, it's just as good. But it's actually not true. There's actually a recent study that came out where they looked at squats, and squatting to end range of motion or basically a deep squat beat out a limited range of motion squat in terms of hypertrophy. And so training through full range of motion is something you want to work toward. And full range of motion means that in these standing calf raises, you are pushing down as hard as you can through the front ball of your foot, and you're getting as much elevation as you can and getting a good squeeze in those calf muscles. So there's a big difference in how your calves are going to develop if you are shortchanging yourself. And, you know, I kind of call it going through the motion. A lot of times we do it because we don't realize that we're doing it, but by not extending and not getting the best contraction possible each rep, you're just shortchanging yourself. So now 15 seconds of rest. These are really uncomfortable. So I remember going into the little extension here. My calves are pretty balled up, and it's fairly painful. So, and that's something that the intensity of your effort's really important. You don't want to bail out early on a set, or, you know, mentally fail when you could have physically gotten another rep or two. It's going to happen to all of us at times, but try to not let your mental weakness be the limiting factor in your physical progress, right? Push yourself. And one of the cool things with bodyweight strength training, and I believe this wholeheartedly, it's really hard to injure yourself. Now, obviously, it's possible to do so, but because we're not, you know, throwing a heavy external load on our spine in any way via deadlift or squats, which are great movements, and weight training safely doesn't increase, it actually decreases injury risk from everyday life. So I wholeheartedly think also that weight training is great, and if you do it safely and you do it well, the myriad benefits. But with bodyweight strength training, we are getting very similar benefits, but the injury risk is super low because you can't do a front lever, back. You can't even get into position for a front lever, back lever without, you know, working through progressions for months upon months, building prerequisite strength and mobility. And so the biggest, you know, quote unquote injury that I see is people get a little bit of tendonitis, oftentimes from getting overzealous and trying to get pull-up work done. And actually, if you foam roll on the lacrosse ball and do some soft tissue mobilization and stretching, that usually doesn't even happen. It's more from a lack of doing those things while you are aggressively getting after pull-ups. But aside from that, I've not worked with anyone who's even gotten injured doing any of this stuff, because the advanced movements are self-limiting, and that you have to progress slowly over time before you can even attempt them. And here I am doing the 15-second rest before the last mini set of the 90-degree calf raises. And these are for the soleus muscle primarily, where we got the gastroc earlier in the single leg standing calf raises. And this wraps up the lower body training session. I am pretty spent cardiometabolically. I got a really good session in. So this is something that I'm doing personally myself right now. This is the training that I'm doing. I'm going to continue with this for a while, and then I'm going to move it into a 3-day split, and I'll post that for you guys as well. So that was the lower body portion of our upper lower split. Something I want you to keep in mind is that I'm programming all these training sessions with efficiency in mind, which means this is designed to give you strength development, hypertrophy, and cardiometabolic conditioning. And this is why I say that if you're doing your training like this, as you saw in this video, I only rested 60 seconds between sets, edited out obviously to make it more watchable. But in doing that, I got pretty gassed. So that 20-minute session was also a 20-minute cardio session. And so you can adjust your rest between sets to accommodate your individual goal. If you're in better shape, you can rest 60 seconds. You can rest 45 seconds even. If your cardiometabolic conditioning is not as good, you can extend those rest periods to accommodate being able to attack each set with a good intensity level. But I do suggest keeping your pace brisk and pushing yourself through your workouts. We all doubt ourselves as humans. We all think we're capable of less than we actually are capable of. So don't sandbag. That's why I time the rest, because I will sandbag. Like, it's just human nature. So make sure that whatever you choose for your rest periods between sets, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 60 seconds, after you've done that for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, trim 10 seconds off or trim 15 seconds off. And this is going to help you increase cardiometabolic conditioning and keep your intensity high. So that's something to keep in mind with the way that I'm programming these. If you are after all-out hypertrophy, all-out mass, we'll program for that stuff. It's going to come. I'll get to all that stuff. Just let me know what you want to see in the comments below. If you have not subscribed yet, subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell, share the videos, tell all your friends. I definitely appreciate all that good stuff. I appreciate every one of you guys, and thank you for supporting Bodyweight Strength.